David Spears. We're coming to you live from the ANU's Llewellyn Hall in Canberra tonight, and joining me on the panel, Independent MP for Warringah, Zali Steggall, Shadow Treasurer Jim Chalmers, Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce, Independent Senator Jacqui Lambie, and Editor-at-Large at The Australian, Paul Kelly. Great to have you all here.
Why is it that before the general election, regardless of how much we owe, each party can find billions of dollars to entice the general public to vote for their party?
Barnaby Joyce, let me go to you first on that one.
Well, what we've got to do is make sure that we earn the money. If you want to spend the money, you've got to earn the money. And I suppose my portfolio is going to the parts of our nation where we earn money, and the first rule of being an accountant is if you're making money in the Pilbara, then you should invest more money in the Pilbara. If we're making money out of our agricultural sector, remembering 8 of our 10 biggest exports, and look at everything you're wearing, it's imported, the clothes, the car you drive, the fuel you use, the television you watch, it's all imported. Somebody somewhere has to put something on a boat and send it in the other direction. So we do spend money because we invest in those areas so that we can get our nation into a stronger position, as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. And a lot of the circumstances are before us as well. You've all seen Prime Minister Sokoware and President Xi Jinping shaking hands in the Solomons. They're going to build a naval base there. And you see what's happening in the Ukraine, and we have a completely different circumstances that are before us. So we've got to invest to make our nation strong, and we have to earn money. And in some areas, we've got to invest to earn money so that we have the capacity to pay for all the things that are so evident in any of the discussions that are happening by the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition. So, and also running a government is a very expensive thing.
Well,
and you've got to balance things up.
Let me jump in there, Barnaby Joyce. There are some things in this budget that you yourself have argued against. A couple of weeks ago, you said a fuel excise cut wouldn't be a good idea. It wouldn't help cost of living. It would just take money away from roads. So why is that now a good idea? Well,
because we're going to maintain our funding in roads. It's vitally important. It's an incredibly important piece of infrastructure for our nation. I think that a lot of the issues that, obviously Cabinet's a collegiate process. And
you win some, you lose some.
In everything you do, in every part of life, isn't that the case?
And this one you lost?
No, I don't think it's a case of losing it. As you also know with Cabinet, the decision of one is the decision of all. And that's, I just want to make sure that we clearly understand the pressures that are coming on us. The reason fuel's going through the roof is 40% of Europe's fuel requirements, energy requirements come out of Russia through the Ukraine. There's an incredible restriction on supply. It's forcing up prices. It won't just do it to fuel, it'll be doing it to food because 30% of the world's grain, barley and wheat come out of Ukraine and the western part of Russia. This is going to have massive effects on our nation and how the globe works.
We're all noticing that. Jacqui Lambie, let me ask you, would you actually like to see government spending more than it is in this budget?
No, what I'd like to see is our money being a lot better targeted. That's what I'd like to see. I mean, if you use JobKeeper as an example, it was great and it helped many people out there, but there was many corporate companies that ended up making massive profits and keeping what we gave them, and they didn't actually need that money. That is not well targeted. That is a problem. We're about next year, or after this financial year, some of the lowest income earners, or all of them, are actually going to be paying a little bit more tax. Yet in 2024-25, those stage 3 tax cuts for anybody earning over $200,000 is going to get a nice big tax cut of $9,000. Let's be realistic up here. I have yet to hear from either side that they've got the guts to pull the plug on the stage 3 tax cuts, and that is what needs to be done, and sometimes it takes courage. And where you lose votes, you will gain them with respect from others. And it's time to make some tough decisions, and it's time to hit those big people who are already on enough money in this country and make sure the ones down the bottom, we can sustain their living. That is what needs to be done.
Zali Steggall, Jacqui Lambie has suggested where you could find some savings, not proceeding with the stage 3 tax cuts. What about you? Are there areas, just coming back to Jean's question, this money that gets spent before an election, Are there areas where you think there's been wasteful spending in this budget?
There is, but I'd like to first come back to Jean's question, which I think is incredibly important, because here we are after 3 years of ignoring a lot of the needs that the community are calling for from the government. You get this just avalanche of promises come election time and all this spending to basically get your vote. But there really isn't the follow-through, and I think that's the frustration and the lack of trust in government, because all these promises are made, but very little is delivered. I think, yes, there was an absolute sweetener in this budget. We're talking $3 billion on that excise pay cut to fuel, for example. I mean,
Are you opposed to that?
Look, I just don't think it's wise spending. It's not, it's across the board. I am not confident that it's going to be passed on in full to consumers, because we have very fluctuating fuel prices. It will be incredibly hard to regulate. I think, like JobKeeper, it will probably result in not a very effective way of helping people. If you compare it, it's $3 billion to our bottom line. For that, you could be assisting a huge amount of households to reduce their power bills. You could have, solar panels on roofs for low-income earners, and they could save up to $1,000 a year on their energy costs. So there are such more effective ways of helping people with the cost of living.
Jim Chalmers, Labor, did back the fuel excise cut and the other cost of living benefits in the budget. Tonight, Anthony Albanese, in his budget replies, also announced further boost in aged care services that I think is worth, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it an extra $2.5 billion?
It is.
So, look, well, tell us, is this also, as Jean suggests, a pre-election spending measure?
No, of course not. And I think what Jean asked, what Zali said about trust and what Jacqui said about waste really get us closer to the nub of the issue here. Yes, a lot of people are concerned that we don't have enough to show for the $1 trillion in debt that is in the budget that future generations will have to pay off. But I think their primary concern is really about whether we're getting value for money for all that money that's being borrowed. Jackie's right that there has been tens of billions of dollars wasted in the budget, which would have been better off invested in a better future for the economy or to provide genuine cost of living relief for people. So our issue, the quantity of the spending matters, but the quality of the spending matters as well. And that's why I'm really proud with the announcement that Anthony Albanese just made a short time ago to put the care back into aged care. The aged care system is in crisis. It's hard to imagine a better use of $2.5 billion of taxpayers' money than to make sure that we've got nurses in aged care 24/7, that we've got the right amount of care minutes, that people are getting decent food, that workers are getting decent pay, and that we've got transparency and accountability so that we can do the right thing by older Australians in our community.
And if a 25% pay rise is recommended by the umpire for those aged care workers, Labor will pay for that?
Well, the reality is that whatever the Fair Work Commission decides about aged care workers, I think they're going to make their decision later this year, a government of either political persuasion will have to fund that. The Prime Minister's made that point. The difference is, as Anthony Albanese said today, we enthusiastically support a pay rise for aged care workers. A lot of aged care workers earn $22 or $23 an hour to do one of the most important jobs that we have in our entire community, look after older and more vulnerable Australians. And we don't think that's right. The next step is the Fair Work Commission. They will nominate a pay rise and they will nominate a time frame, and whoever wins the election in May will have to fund that increase in pay.
Paul Kelly, and again coming back to Jean's question, it's about the sort of pre-election spending that we see. At the end of this budget week, we've heard from both sides now. How do they compare? Who is being more responsible, do you think?
Well, I think we've seen a fascinating situation this week, David, with two very different economic presentations. Tonight, from Anthony Albanese, we saw a personal manifesto. We saw him speaking from the heart, filled with emotion, about the sort of economy he wants. And he made clear he wants an economy that cares about people. He wants an economy that puts people centre stage. So he's talking about the lived experience of the Australian people when it comes to the economy. He's talking about wages, aged care accommodation and childcare. Now on Tuesday night, we saw a very different presentation. We saw Josh Frydenberg deliver a pre-election budget, and that budget showed strong economic recovery, very good numbers, a great surge in jobs, a very significant improvement in terms of the bottom line. But he was talking about the macroeconomy, and the macroeconomy looks very good. But the problem for the government is how people feel about the economy. The problem for the government is the lived experience of the people. So essentially, what you've got here is you've got the government talking about and documenting the economic recovery, and you've got the Labor Party talking more about the people and having an economy that's people-centred. Now,
is either one more responsible, though, given where the economy's at and what the people need?
I thought that the budget on Tuesday night was responsible, and all you've got to do is follow the numbers. So if you look at the increase in revenue over the forward estimates, about 70% of that went to improve the budget bottom line. That is an extra $100 billion, reducing the deficit over 5 years. About 30% or a bit under went in tax and spend. That is, went in government decisions in the context of the election. So what that shows is it shows a budget geared to both the politics and the economics. But Frydenberg knew he had to get a much better bottom line, and he did.
Thanks. When Scott Morrison's own party says that he is a bully, a liar, he has no moral compass and he's unfit to lead the country, how can he expect the Australian public to consider himself fit to lead the country?
And Barnaby, we'll get your thoughts on that in a moment. But Jacqui Lambie, let me go to you first on this. Liberal Senator Concetta Fierravanti-Wells this week called the Prime Minister an autocrat, a bully, unfit for office. Did that ring true for you in your dealings with the Prime Minister?
I think for especially some of the females, I haven't heard any of the men stand up yet, that may be just a male thing, but certainly for females up there, I cannot take anything away from what Connie Ferranti-Wells said straight out of her mouth and straight to the point. And I can tell you she did it very, very well. It was not nasty, it was just the truth. And that is the truth of the matter.
So from your perspective, what's an example of that? What's the evidence of these are strong accusations?
Yeah, so for me it was when I was trying to do the Refu Deal job. You know, it really, and I'm just going to say it, but it was like dealing with a 2-year-old, to be honest with you, on a tempy-tampy. That's what it was like. It was either his way or the highway. I refused to move and I refused to budge. And I can tell you, I can put up with a fair bit. I've spent 10 years in the military. I was one of those first girls trialled in those combat units. But, you know, sticking your chest out at me and trying to intimidate me is never going to end up in a good result.
So what did he do for those who aren't across what happened?
So for me, I had no choice. What you would usually do is if you're in the armed forces, you'd probably jump the table and just about grab hold of them. But for me, this was about humanity and about making sure over 1,000 people were dispersed off Nauru and given a second chance at life. So it was worth me just shutting up and taking what I had to take. And I can tell you now, I look back and it brings me into tears that every bit of that, and knowing that Nauru is nearly cleared apart from a few hundred people, but New Zealand is going to take the last of them, and some of those in hotel detention, it was worth taking every bit of it.
Zali Steggall, just a couple of things I wanted to ask you in relation to this. One, is this what independents should do? A secret deal, one issue, trade for another issue. Is that how you operate?
Well, it's not how I operate. Look, I welcome that the refugees have now got a resettlement plan.
But a part of the deal was Jacqui Lambie
incredibly frustrated that it took 3 years, and let's get real, it's going to take another 3 years. It's only 150 per year for the New Zealand deal. So I find it entirely unacceptable that these poor people have another 6 years, have had 6 years in this process. So I personally do have issues with that. No, but what you find independents, and I would argue the crossbench, break the status quo and hold the major parties to account on so many issues. It's not about secret deals. It is about advancing the issues that our communities want us to advance, that the major parties are avoiding because it's not popular in the backroom deals.
And the question from Stuart was about the Prime Minister's character. Tell us about your experience with Scott Morrison.
Look, I have to say all my experiences with Scott Morrison have been professional. But and so I don't have any personal complaints to make. But if I could say and I still have trouble thinking of myself as a politician, but as a person coming into this parliament, I have been shocked by the conduct I've witnessed in the chamber, in the House of Representatives, where we are there on behalf of so many in our communities.
What's shocked you?
The slouching, the turning your back to people speaking to you. I think there's images of the Prime Minister making fun and turning his back to the debate. I think it is disrespectful. I think some of the language used in Parliament, some of the throwaway lines are disrespectful and not becoming of a person in that role. Everyone would be really surprised. We have no code of conduct in Parliament for parliamentarians. A sports person is pulled up by a code of conduct if you bring the sport into disrepute, and we have nothing in Parliament. I find that quite shocking. And we know from last year with the allegations that Parliament has a culture problem. We have a workplace problem, and it has to come from the top. Change has to come from the top. Respect, better standards. And I think it is an indictment on the Prime Minister that so many, and including the Deputy Prime Minister, made comments as well about the Prime Minister's character.
This was a text message.
That, you know, at a time where we need leadership, we have floods, we have bushfires, we have an unstable international arena. We need a head of state, we need a Prime Minister that commands respect and is trusted.
Well, just on that, Barnaby Joyce,
concerns.
Yeah, let's get your response then to the question. It's about the character of the PM. There's the comment you made. Emmanuel Macron called him a liar as well, and so on. I mean, do you understand voters having a bit of a concern about his character?
Look, no. I think it's incredibly important that we understand it's an incredibly tough job. And politics, by its very nature, by the moment you sign that you're going to stand for pre-selection, you understand what you're buying into. It's not. It is not for the weak-hearted, because you're running a country, you have the responsibility of 26 million people before you, and it's a tough game. And so often, as they say about politics, as an adage, and I didn't make it up, it's been around forever, it ends in the 4 Ds so often, that is death, dishonour, disillusionment or disendorsement. It's only the lucky ones that actually stand and give their valedictory speech.
So what do you say to Jacqui Lambie then, who's had a different experience with the PM?
I say that we can all, in every section, we've seen so many issues recently which scream at us we can do better. Yeah. And that's why we had the Kate Jenkins report, because we can do better. We're not, you know, it's not saying that's acceptable, it's saying that needs to be fixed and we need to work on it, and that's precisely what we are doing.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but the truth of the matter is that Connie Ferrandi-Wells got done over. She's one of the best performers up there. She always has been, because she speaks her mind, because she stands up as a woman. For that she is punished for that, and that is why she has not had a ministry for so long, and that is why she was not pre-selected, and that is the truth of the matter. That's how it went down.
Paul, what is the context of what Conchita Ferrandi-Wells said this week, and how damaging do you think it is for the PM?
I think it's very damaging. I mean, this was the week of the budget. This was yet another week when the government wanted to get clean political air. The government wanted to set the agenda around the budget, focus on the economy, and the budget on Tuesday night looked as though it was going to do that. Then we had yet another attack on the Prime Minister, this time from his own ranks. This was an extraordinary attack, I think particularly damaging, accusing the Prime Minister of being unfit for high office, of being a bully, of lacking a moral compass. And this is particularly damaging because it feeds into the debate about the Prime Minister's character, which has been going on now for quite some time. And we did see for quite a long time last year, one of the Labor Party's major themes of attack on Scott Morrison was about character. And this is showing up in the focus group. So there's no doubt it is a problem for the government and a problem for the Prime Minister.
This question is for the Deputy Prime Minister and the Shadow Treasurer. Like my peers, I'm faced with the stark reality that I may never be able to own my own house. Faced with this, what are your respective parties putting forward in this budget to help us in this housing affordability crisis?
Jasper, thanks. We'll come to Jim Chalmers and Barnaby Joyce, but let me come to you first, Jacqui Lambie, because this is a big issue in Tasmania, I know. Housing affordability, rental prices as well. What needs to be done?
Yeah, so unfortunately in Tasmania, I think in Burnie itself, it's buying a house has gone up just over 30%. Down in another rural and regional area down the south has gone up 64% in the last 2 years. Rent has gone through the roof. There was many buyers down there that sold out, and therefore pushed the rent out. We have a lot more homeless people out there. Our public housing, I can tell you, I can't even get people emergency housing down there. It is shocking. We've got them crying in our electorate every day of the week. It is just god awful. We just cannot keep up with it. For you people out there, I don't understand how on a normal wage you will be able to possibly pay rent and save money and put money in the bank. It's just not practical, and it's just.
Well,
not
Jacqui Lambie,
going to
what about negative gearing rules? Where do you stand on that one?
Well, you know, the best thing that we can do is we know that you're never going to be able to buy in the cities, so we need to push us out into the rural and regional areas, but we need to make sure out there that there is jobs, there is public transport, there is childcare, there is services available. That's what we need to be doing, and I just don't think we're doing that, and the infrastructure's not keeping up with it either. But right now it is really difficult, and even if you borrow now, it is so expensive. We've got no idea. I'm sure Mr Kelly's probably got more idea than what I have. I cringe to think what interest rates are going to look like in 3 or 4 years' time. I'm not an economist, but if you go and borrow money now, or you go and get a loan for 500,000 or 600,000, that's if you can buy a house for that. Those interest rates go up by a couple of percent. You're going to go under.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Jim Chalmers, coming back to Jasper's question, what is Labor's strategy to solve this housing crisis?
Well, we understand that the price of rent and the price of buying a house is going through the roof. The Prime Minister was asked about this earlier in the week. He was asked about challenges facing renters, and he said, well, it's easy enough, go and buy a house is the solution to that, and that's obviously absurd and shows...
Well, he was pointing to their first home guarantee policy.
Yeah, I understand.
To help people into
No,
the
I
market.
understand, David. We've got
What's your plan?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of policies. We think that it's important that we begin with social and affordable housing. So we've got a policy to build 30,000 new homes. Our Housing Australia Future Fund is all about that, including making sure that people can live closer to where they work, particularly essential workers, that we can find a home for people who might be fleeing domestic and family violence.
That's important. Jasper's asking about owning a house, though.
Beg your pardon?
Jasper's asking about owning a house.
Yeah. And so the housing challenge is renting, it's buying, and it's social, right? And so you've got to work out where to begin. And we've said we'll begin with social and affordable housing. We've also got a policy to help people save for their first home by tweaking, upgrading the government's policy. The government, in welcome ways, we genuinely welcome this, copied part of our policy when it comes to people in regional areas, but we've also got a policy for people in the suburbs and cities of Australia, which makes it easier to save a deposit so you can buy a home.
You did at the last election, though, have that plan, of course, to curb the negative gearing rules. You said this was all about levelling the playing field. Do you no longer hold that view?
Yeah, we're not going down that path, as you know, David, as you've asked me on your other show a couple of times.
But have you changed your view?
Beg your pardon?
Have you changed your view?
I have. Yeah, I genuinely have. We don't intend to change the negative gearing rules. We do intend to build a heap of social and affordable housing. We do intend to make it easier to save for a home, and we'll have more policy on this too in the election campaign.
All right, Barnaby Joyce, what's the plan to help someone like Jasper own a home one day?
Well, for the people who are doing it really tough, for homelessness, in that area, and I used to work for St Vincent de Paul, we've got about $5.5 billion in the forwards that we're trying to obviously target on that. Then the next step up is we do believe that the greatest form of security is a house, and so it's saying to a single mother, if you can come up with 2.5%, I understand many times that's incredibly difficult, we'll underwrite the deposit to 10% to assist you to get into that house. The greatest capital gain you would have got lately is if you owned a house. This is part of our policy, and then there's another section which
just on that one though,
I think it's really important, which was never mentioned tonight, is that we've got to make sure that there are opportunities in other areas of our nation where housing is cheaper and more affordable. That's why we want to develop regional areas. And you have to also work hand in glove with both local government and state government. They've all got a role in this.
On the first home guarantee, which you reference, it allows single parents to only have a 2% deposit.
2.5. Yeah.
2.5. Would you recommend someone, given what Jacqui Lambie was saying about interest rates in the next few years, would you recommend someone buy a home with a 2.5% deposit?
I know a lot of people who have, and I would obviously ask them about where their circumstances are going into the future. I'm an accountant, I've done that numerous times. You'd have to look at the circumstances they're in, the debt they're taking.
You've got to be careful, in other words.
What their forward cash flow position is like. And it's just like how you do a budget. You've got to know what you're earning, and you've got to know what you're spending, and that's how you make prudent decisions.
Yeah, the stark reality is this: you can't get a tradie for the next 2 years. Okay, shipping's going through the roof, materials are costing more. Even if you try and putting money away now, if you think you're in reach of building a house now, you give it another 3 or 4 years on the trajectory we're in, good luck to you. You're never going to, you're owning an Aussie house, your dream of doing that has gone out the window. You're just never going to do it. You can't pay rent and save. Okay, you just can't do that. We all know that. Not on minimum wages. It's just unrealistic.
Well, I disagree with that. First house I bought cost me $67,000. Now,
Jesus, Barnaby, I don't know what planet you're on, but you're looking at $600,000 now, and that's on a good day, fair income.
It's
good news, everybody, because Barnaby bought a cheap house a long time ago. Your
life's
sweet.
made.
Yeah.
What I think I'm explaining is we have to acknowledge, and I know it's that people don't want it, but in areas of regional Australia, housing is a lot cheaper.
Well, yeah.
We've got to make sure the opportunity arrives where those cheaper houses are.
Jasper, does that give you much help, you think?
I just intended to say that since then, Barnaby, the government has pumped the housing market to the point where that's a completely unrealistic goal, especially for somebody like me. And whilst I do agree with you that the lower levels of housing are essential, if you want that market to grow, you need early buyers like me and my thousands of peers around the nation.
If I go back to that same town now, you can still buy a house for about $200,000.
All right, well, let's move to our final question tonight.
Werris Creek.
Werris Creek, there you go.
Is there any jobs there? Is there any manufacturing
We're
left
actually
there?
are.
Okay.
Well, one of the.
Thanks.
Well, it's funny you ask that because we are doing that, and we've had a big.
Is it there now, or are you doing that? Which one? Is
It's
it
there
still
now.
there? It's there now.
It's
okay.
there now. We've got a major distribution hub, Crawford's. We've upgraded Poly Dam. We're actually building the economy of New England and the economy of Werris Creek.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. That is all we have time for. Please thank our panel, Zali Steggall, Jim Chalmers, Barnaby Joyce, Jacqui Lambie and Paul Kelly. And thanks to our terrific audience here tonight for sharing your questions, some really good ones. Next week, Virginia Trioli will be with you live from Melbourne, and you can join me on Insiders on Sunday morning. I'll be joined by the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Until then, good night.